December 28th, 2025, Buddhadhamma, page 1010, chapter 10.6. Today we're going to discuss the complex relationship between craving and desire. So tanha and chanda. And the first point, interplay between wholesome and unwholesome desire. Some people may encounter here that desire for good health is most likely a form of craving, because people want to be healthy and strong in order to experience pleasure to the utmost. This argument stems from an inaccurate interpretation. It does not accord with the Buddhist doctrine of analysis, vibhajavata, which encourages a clear and concise discrimination of causes, of factors, the stages and conditions, rather than mixing up these factors, etc., and then analyzing them in a jumbled way. A state of good health, absence of illness, and ease in inherently favorable and positive, but one then decides to do with what is this good health is another stage in the process. Compare this with mindfulness, which is wholesome and supportive factor, but which may be applied either in a correct fashion as right mindfulness, samma sati, or incorrectly as wrong mindfulness, miccha sati. One may not be desiring pleasant sensations, but rather wish to rely on good health in order to perform kind deeds or to practice for the elimination of mental impurities. In general, people thinking tends to be comprised of a mixture of factors that is important that one is able to distinguish them. At times, this mixture of factors is very complicated. A person, for example, may think in this way: I will eat only enough and will thus become strong, attractive, and a healthy person. This way of thinking can be divided into three separate parts. A, the person recognizes that the truly desirable results of eating is a healthy and strong body. B, the person's desire and contentment with the supportive state of good health is pure and unadulterated. And C, there is a desire to possess this strength and good health, for it to belong to me, to be recognized by others as a healthy person, or to identify with the good health and generate such thoughts as, may I become a beautiful person, I will be stronger than he, or I will be prettier than she. In this case, chanda, wholesome desire, and tanha, craving, overlap and accompany one each other. Wholesome desire arises and it then followed by craving. This accords with the principle that goodness can be a condition for the bad. When the process of thinking arrives at the state of craving and self-identification, it begins to breed suffering and diverse problems. For the mundane, unawakened person, this complexity is normal, and their acts of goodness can thus still create and increase suffering. The solution to the apply wise reflection, yoniso manasikara, and establish mindfulness, clear comprehension, the wholesome desire, in order to bar or cut off ignorance and craving, and to prevent craving from taking advantage of wholesome desire. In the circumstances that craving has already arisen, one can try to reverse the process so that the craving conditions wholesome desire in accord with the principle that unwholesome can be the condition for the good. For an ordinary person to apply these means of correction is already to be reached an excellent level of spiritual development. Secondly, relying on wholesome desire. An attribute of craving that ought to be stressed one more time is that craving acts as a motivation or determining factor force whenever an action is a prerequisite for experiencing pleasure, sukha. This attribute reviews the flip side of this process. When tanha, craving, is unable to experience sukha, pleasure, it is unwilling to induce people to act. Indeed, it sometimes urges people in the opposite direction by inducing them to refrain from acting, even through the action which lead to a beneficial result. For example, when a person is ill, the body requires medicine in order to combat infections, remove toxins, or repair damaged organs. Since the medicine does not provide pleasurable sensation, craving, tanha, urges the person not to take it. In this case, the person relies on wholesome desire, chanda, for persuasion in taking the medicine. Occasionally, in times of acute sickness, one develops a lack of hunger, lack of appetite for food, for that tanha, the craving, normally find delicious. Here, one does not eat, even though that food would be beneficial. At such times, the tanha, the craving for existence, specifically with bawa tanha, the craving for existence, may be of no help. Occasionally, the craving for annihilation, explicitly vibhava tanha, the craving for annihilation, is dominant, giving rise to utter despair and such thoughts as, without pleasure, sukha, life is meaningless. Why should I go on living? This tanha, craving, drives a person in the opposite direction, leading to a refusal to eat. In such circumstances, a person must wisely reflect yoniso manasikara on the objectives and benefits of food in order to establish wholesome desire, chanda, and find the motivation to eat. The stronger the desire, chanda, the stronger is the mind. The person thus resists craving and eats with enthusiasm. Here one sees how wholesome desire, chanda, supports efforts and gives rise to concentration, samadhi. Some sick people may not be able to generate wholesome desire, chanda, themselves. Before they are willing to eat, they may require a friend to instill a feeling of death and wish for self-preservation. They may then take the medicine out of panic. When craving for existence is the motivation force, however, the mind is beclouded and agitated, unlike with wholesome desire, chanda, in which case the mind is peaceful. This is because craving is tied up with ignorance, avijja, while wholesome desire springs from panya, wisdom. The third point is seeking gratification, escaping the unpleasant, and protecting the sense of self, or the classification of the sense of self. When people are angry and hostile to the point of killing one another, the true reason for killing is not the wish for another person's death. The death of an enemy is the same as the death of any other person, insofar as it offers no benefit to the perpetrator. The real reason for the people to kill an enemy is that it is the best precondition for acquiring what is desired, to maintain self-security, self-importance, to escape from that which threatens the stability of the self, to separate themselves from what is unacceptable, or to cause the greatest imaginable harm or destruction to a disagreeable person. If they know that their enemy continuation of life will not impact the stability of self-identity, they will find another way other than killing to increase their self-importance. Or they will find a way to create more suffering for their enemy than by killing them. They will then refrain from killing and apply this other, more effective precondition for achieving their aims. If people are unable to kill or to harm their enemy, unable to eliminate undesirable people or things, then it happens frequently that they think of killing themselves or want to die. In truth, they do not want to die. The real reason for thinking in this way is that when they are unable to find another means to escape from undesirable people or things, killing themselves becomes the only avenue for escape. Take, for example, someone who wants to kill himself because he is lovesick. His loved one is marrying someone else, or because he has some horrible untreated disease, treatable disease. Both of these undesirable conditions, which is unable to rectify or eliminate, and thus the only way to escape is by self-annihilation, suicide. If, however, someone tells him that his beloved has not yet married and surely still loves him, or that there is a doctor who can most likely treat the illness, then he will renounce the wish to die immediately, because there is more satisfactory provision to escape from this undesirable situation. A similar example is the savage practice in interracial or tribal warfare, in which the victors slay all surviving males of the vanished side, including children and the elderly, but do not kill the young women, at least not immediately, but hold them captive to satisfy their pleasure. The victors do not gain any individual advantages by the genocide of their male enemies, but kill them out of fear of stemming from a wish to protect the stability of their collective identity. Killing is deemed the best method to maintain this stability. Abstaining from killing the young woman does not result from any wish to preserve their lives. What they desire is pleasure, which is obtained from these women, and the preservation of the women's lives is merely a precondition to indulge in this pleasure. The fourth point is wholesome desire and loving kindness, so chanta and metta. The subject of desire is linked to the vital quality of loving kindness, metta, as well as other three divine abidings. The four divine abidings are the Brahma Viharas, metta, karuna, compassion, mudita, empathetic joy, and equanimity, upekkha. The Brahma Viharas. But loving kindness, metta, an examination of loving kindness helps to clarify the meaning of tanha and chanta, craving and wholesome desire. The quality of metta is familiar to most Buddhists, but it does give rise to misunderstandings. Some common translations for metta are love, friendliness, well-wishing, and the desire for others to be happy and fortunate. These definitions stem from straightforward, but confusion arises from some people in regard to the distinction between love that is metta, the love that is unwholesome. Unwholesome love is usually referred to Pali as seneha, which means love for a specific individual or selfish love. It leads to narrow-mindedness, attachment, excitement, and passion. This is the opposite to metta, pure love, which a person feels towards other human beings and all creatures as friends of this earth, companions in suffering, companions in life and death. It is an inclusive, altruistic form of love, which broadens, eases, and brightens the heart. The commentators were aware of this confusion and thus emphasized certain points in order to prevent misunderstanding. They explained that the advantage of metta is a reduction of ill will, while the disadvantage is that it can cause self-love or selfish love. They describe how the distant enemy of loving kindness is ill will, which is the close enemy is lust, raja. People must be extremely cautious of raja, lust. One moment of carelessness, appamado, and it suddenly flares up. Sineha is the synonym for tanha. Unwholesome love, which is the opposite of metta, is therefore love springing from or adulterated by tanha, craving. As stated earlier, the main characteristics of tanha, craving, are the desire for pleasure and the desire for self-protection. The criterion, therefore, to decide whether love stems from tanha, craving, or is it to see whether the love is a sincere wish for others' well-being, or whether it is a wish for others' well-being merely as the prerequisites to experience pleasure or to reinforce the stability of the self. People may ally to love another person, for instance, their wife, husband, or friend, and claim that their love is so great and true that the other person's life is of equal value to their own. Later, however, following the course of time, things may change. The spouse's body, for example, may change, no longer to be agreeable to the other partner's desires. Or the spouse or friend may no longer support or provide a sense of security to the sense of self. The former love then fades or disappears. In this case, the person no longer recognizes the value of the other, no longer recognizes cherished, valued traits in the other person. This kind of love is not metta. It is merely love tainted by tanha, craving. Or it is craving itself, which seizes the opportunity to take advantage of someone else's, the positive attributes, to pander to its own desires or to reinforce self-identity. While traveling in the countryside and seeing the enormous tree with overarching branches, lush green leaves, someone whose mind is expansive and appreciates the beauty of nature will delight in splendor and magnificence of that tree, wish for it to prosper and to be free from danger. In that moment, the mind is devoid and directed to the tree's well-being. One's thoughts are benevolent. They are not selfish, accusative, or covetous. The mind delights in the healthy, natural state of the tree. The state of mind is wholesome, virtuous, and peaceful. It is beneficial to that person and to others. The pleasure in witnessing the fulfillment of this tree, or the wish for it to exist in the state of completeness, is wholesome desire, chanda. One can say that one feels goodwill towards the tree. In the same manner, we see other people in good health, strong and at ease. We delight in their well-being, wishing for them to be healthy and free from illness. The state of the mind radiates outwards and does not resolve around selfish concerns. This wish for other beings to extend in a state of happiness and fulfillment is wholesome desire, and is expressed towards living creatures, and is given the special designation of loving kindness, metta. The fifth point, continued harassment by tanha, by craving. For many people, however, the mind does not function in this way. In the case of the tree or someone else in nature, the mind may be easily receptive to kindness, but in the relation to other people, this tends to be more difficult. Tanha, craving in one form or another, frequently interferes with or overwhelms the wholesome state of mind. For example, when one sees a healthy and vigorous person with a graceful body, if the person is of opposite sex, instead of rejoicing in the person's well-being, tanha, craving, incites one to see the person as a source of personal pleasure. And if the person is of the same sex, one tends to feel that he or she is an impediment or a threat to the self of sense, causing one to feel inferior and reducing one's self-importance. Instead of having an open, generous, and cheerful mind endowed with loving kindness, one's senses of self feels impacted, and the mind is confined, stressed, tainted by tanha, craving. One harbors infatuation, lust, envy, jealousy, or malice, all of which are unwholesome. An uncomfortable state of mind forms mental illness, obstructive to oneself and others. The Sakha Panha Sutra presents the following process. Chanta, here meaning tanha chanta, bhaya apaya, separation into the love and the despise, isa machariya, envy and jealousy. The discuss here is limited to encounters with pleasant objects, which relates to chanta, tanha, and metta. In contrast, when one encounters unpleasant, infirm, painful, or troubling objects, if one's mind is wholesome, one will experience compassion. If one's mind is unwholesome, one will experience contempt or hatred. A guideline to verify whether one's love for another person is true, metta, or is metta mixed with tanha, craving, or simply a synonym of tanha, craving, is to ask oneself these questions. If I am unable to derive sukha, pleasure, from this person, or if his or her existence no longer bolsters a sense of self-security, will I still love this person? Will I value and cherish him or her? Will I still delight in his or her well-being? The love of parents for their children is a good benchmark for metta. Parents generally love their children, delight in their well-being, want them to be prosperous, happy, and free from danger. The parents experience this love without viewing their children as the source of pleasure, and regardless of whether their children's lives reinforce a sense of self-security. However, when the parents are still unenlightened, tanha, craving, tends to infatuate and taints the parents' love to some extent. Their love is not completely pure, as it is evident in the common attachment of these are my children. They belong to me. Most parents still hope that their children will help to increase self-security or self-importance. For example, they want their children to have a high social standing so that they can be proud, share in their prestige, or they fear that their children will lose social standing and thus they themselves will be ashamed. A slight attachment in normal or unawakened people, but it expands the control of the entire behavior of a person, and it causes considerable damage. From the perspective of metta, the important point is that love is unconditional. The parent loves the child regardless of whether he or she boasts their sense of self-importance. When the child is abandoned by everyone else, the parents continue to provide love and support. When conflict arises between their children and someone else's, parents tend to feel indignant towards the opposing party and are biased towards their children. They're unable to consider the issues in a truly objective way because their love is still mixed up with tanha, craving. The love still gives rise to division between the love and the not love, and thus still causes problems and dukkha, suffering. An understanding of metta helps to increase an understanding of chanta, wholesome desire, wholesome enthusiasm, because both of these qualities concern the subject of love and desire. They are both wholesome, pure, and is supportive to the mind. There is a distinction, however, between these two qualities. The term chanta has a broad definition and will be applied universally, whereas the term metta technically has a more narrow definition and pertains specifically to a person's relationship to living creatures, to animals, and to other people. Living creatures are the objects, aramana, of loving kindness. In addition, metta, along with other three divine abidings of the Brahma Viharas, relies on chanta, specifically Katu Kamyata Chanta as the foundation or a primary agent. Point 6. Review of wholesome desire. The former example of a person delighting in the healthy state of a tree without the interference of selfish desire was a way to introduce the subject of metta, loving kindness. But in fact, it accurately describes the quality of wholesome desire, chanta, itself. Metta, loving kindness, begins from chanta, wholesome desire. But technically, it is confined to a person's relationship to other people and animals. Chanta, wholesome desire, on the other hand, can be applied to everything, and thus is a discussion of chanta is more wide-reaching. Chanta, wholesome desire, is a satisfaction in and the wish for things to exist in an optimum or ideal way. It is a delight in the integrity of things, the wish for all things to exist in a wholesome, correct, prosperous, and complete state. Chanta, wholesome desire, includes the desire to act in order to bring about the state of wholesomeness and integrity. One wishes for the benefits that arises directly from specific actions in line with causes and effects, rather than wishing for those advantages that feed self-gratification. We can ask how people endowed with the virtuous state of mind would respond if they were encountered by the following situations. A filthy floor in a house. A public place littered with rubbish. School desk is in a cluttered mess. Withering trees. A pothole road. A destitute child in tattered clothes. An ill person with no nursing care. Areas with widespread theft and persecution. Drug addiction, rampant gambling, and a lack of attention to education. Rudeness and insensitivity. Lack of harmony or unrighteous behavior. Similarly, how would they respond to encountering these conditions? A clean, well-ordered place, a shady, refreshing grove of trees, harmonious community, or a peaceful, contented person. Chanta, wholesome desire, is love of sila, virtue. Wholesome conditions, kusala, dhamma, and a good quality of life. For example, cleanliness, orderliness, tranquility, a natural countryside, and a healthy, refreshing environment. People with an abundance of wholesome desire, chanta, strive for the quality of life and seek what is truly valuable for their lives. In the Tipitaka, the Pali Canon, a person who strives for goodness is called kusala nu isi, meaning someone who seeks the noble path, Arya Magga, or seeks Nibbita. The Bodhisattva, the Buddha, before enlightenment, a person before enlightenment, a Bodhisattva, when he went in search of the truth, Satcha, is referred to one who seeks that which is wholesome. Kin kusala nu isi. Or kin kusala gavisi. The state of mind is pure. It does not require a desire for sense pleasure or an involvement by selfish thoughts and preoccupations. Of course, if one allows tanha, craving, to interfere, then sense desire and selfish intentions, cetana, can manifest. Such a state of mind does not arise independently or randomly, but requires a person to reason with understanding. This is opposed to the perpetual stem of avijja and tanha, the stream of ignorance and craving, which requires no reflection. The love of goodness, or the ability to determine what is good, relies on the understanding of the value of satcha, of things, the truth of things. Unlike the stream of avijja and tanha, of ignorance and craving. When a person encounters sukha and dukkha, pleasure and pain, and then suddenly the impulsively experiences like or dislike to give rise to chanta, wholesome desire, a person must apply wise reflection, yoni so manasikara, to sever the stream of avijja and tanha, to cut ignorance and craving and replace it with nirota, the cessation cycle, the end of avijja and tanha, ignorance and craving. Wise and skillful reflection, yoni so manasikara, may be needed merely to steer a person's thinking in the proper direction towards a course of wholesome desire, chanta. Or it may involve a great amount of consideration, a great amount of analysis, a great amount of inquiry, and a great amount of reasoning. When wise reflection arises, when yoniso manasikara arises, the stream of avijja ends, the stream of ignorance ends. When the mind sees the value of something, it naturally inclines towards and engages with it without the need for the force of enticement. Beware of the conclusion between chanta and tanha, between wholesome desire and craving. When one enters an area that is clean and refreshing, for example, craving too can lead to feelings of delight and satisfaction. The difference is that craving delights in the pleasant sensation stemming from seeing, hearing, and touching various sense objects located in that place. It does not delight in the goodness directly. The action resulting from the craving is to linger in that place, to experience sense pleasure, and may lead to laziness. So be aware of that. At this stage, perseverance arises, an effort, vidya, to produce, establish, and fulfill wholesome things or wholesome states. In some situations, Gautama Buddha revealed intermediate, subsidiary factors in this process. For example, in the Kitakiri Sutra and the Kanki Sutra, Gautama Buddha presented the sequence of stages in Dhamma practice, beginning with faith, ending with the realization of the highest truth. The stages that are relevant to the discussions that are when a person has listened to the Dhamma teaching and memorized it, he examines its meaning. When he examines its meaning, he gains and understands in accord with the subject of contemplation. With such an understanding, chanta arises, and with chanta, perseverance, etc. The stages of examining the meaning of the teaching is precisely the stage of wise reflection, yoniso manasikara. The understanding according with the subject of contemplation is the result of this examination. And these two stages comprise in the application of panya. Examining the meaning of the teachings, atu papa rika, understanding according with the subject of contemplation, dhamma ni jana akanti. Now, we're going to go to the sequence in Pali, and then we'll do it in English. But this is the sequence from the stages of learning. The entire sequence is follows. Sattha, upasankamana, parya rupa sanya, sota vatana, dhamma savana, dhamma tarana, atu paparika, dhamma niraka kanti, chanta usaha, durana, patana, anarata, sacha nupati. Now in English, faith, a person approaches the teacher. He pays respect to the teacher. He gives ear. He listens to the law of Dhamma. He memorizes the law of Dhamma. He examines the meaning of the teaching of the law of Dhamma. He gains an understanding that accords with the subject of contemplation. He gains enthusiasm. He gains perseverance. He moves into scrutiny. He has resolute effort. And then the person achieves perfect understanding, or the truth of understanding. This is the process of the stage of learning. When a person discerns and understands the goodness and value of something, wholesome desire, chanda, arises. The mind inclines towards, delights in, and desire this thing. In summary, yo ni so mana sikara, wise reflection leads to chanda, wholesome desire, which then leads to perseverance, usaha. The seventh point, can chanda wish for unwholesome things? Some people may pose the question whether wholesome desire, chanda, besides desiring goodness, can also lead to akusala dhamma, unwholesome things. People perform bad deeds because they yearn for pleasurable sense experiences. They wish to reinforce a sense of self-importance. They wish to escape from an undesirable object or state. Their general way of conducting their lives is dominated by impulsive sensory responses. When they experience a pleasant sense of impression, they are pleased and covetous. When they experience an unpleasant impression, they are frustrated, angry, and hostile. The causes for unwholesome or evil actions are avidya, ignorance, and tanha, craving, indulging, grasping, and upatana. The desire to perform bad action thus always stems from avidya and tanha, ignorance and craving, following the principles of contingency or preconditions mentioned earlier. Wholesome desire, chanda, on the other hand, results from understanding, from a delight in the integrity of things, from a awareness of causes and effects. When one has contemplated things independent of agreeable or disagreeable sensation, vedana, independent of like and dislike, one sees which things are truly beneficial and then inclines the mind towards them. This inclination of mind towards wholesome things is automatically a freedom from bad deeds, which results from perseverance and preferences and aversions stemming from tanha, craving. For this reason, chanda, wholesome desire, cannot be desire for negative states or performing unwholesome actions. Granted, actions prompted by chanda, wholesome desire, may be inappropriate or wrong due to insufficient consideration or inadequate understanding. The desired beneficial results may not arise from these actions, or adverse effects may arise instead. The true agent behind bad actions, however, are avidya and tanha, or ignorance and craving. When the factors have been severed, the discussion of inappropriate behavior or ways of rectifying this behavior is another subject, which will be discussed below. Conversely, people may ask whether tanha, craving, can be desired wholesome things or desired to do good. The answer is unequivocally yes, and there is frequently the case. But the desire for tanha, for wholesome things, is connected to, contingent on, increasing pleasurable sense experiences or on the reinforcing self-importance. Normally, this desire does for goodness is the function of tanha, for existing, mainly bhava tanha. For example, the desire to be born as a god, to have splendor, long life, heavenly pleasures, or an entourage of celestial nymphs, the desire to be a hero, to receive praise and adoration, which will enhance one's self-image. The desire to become a sotapanna, extreme enter, to become great and surpass ordinary people, or the desire to be a good person, to receive honor and praise will reinforce the sense of the self or classification of the self. Craving, tanha, is not interested in whether the action is good or bad. It only requires that the action is preconditioned for pleasure or self-aggrandizement. So the desire to destroy the self or the desire for extinction, which forms vibhava tanha, resembles the desire for goodness. For example, a person holding an nihilistic view, ucheta ditti, may yearn to become an arihat in order to cease existing and to cease being born. The desire to become an arihat in order to become a supreme Buddhist, however, is an example for a bhava tanha. Indeed, because tanha, craving, often desires wholesome things, people get confused with having trouble distinguishing between tanha, craving, and wholesome desire, chanda. Point 8, interference and intrusion by tanha, by craving. The confusion between craving and chanda exists because there are two qualities often intertwined, interchangeable, and interdependent. For the mundane, unawakened person, tanha, craving, is an ingrained characteristic and constantly waits for that opportunity regardless of whether wholesome desires arises or not. If wholesome desire is absent, tanha, craving, operates without interpretation. If chanda, wholesome desire, arises, craving superstitiously seeks an opportunity to interfere and take over. Human beings are able to develop exceptional panya and sila, wisdom and virtue. People will develop in panya and other spiritual qualities. Tanha, craving, likewise, becomes more subtle, manifests in more refined ways. Therefore, when wholesome desire, chanda, arises, tanha may interfere intermediately or immediately by taking control, forming personal attachment, identifying with an object, or creating the division of mine and yours. The arising of tanha, craving, then sows the seed for dukkha, suffering, and various problems. For example, when one is able to sustain wholesome desire throughout an activity, one will be gladdened, fulfilled by goodness and merits of the activity. Such good actions lead to the faultless or impeccable states, anavija bhava, in which a person does not experience any harmful consequences of his actions, whether he or himself or to others. The commentaries include this teaching. Faith that possesses great devotion to an object is both an attribute of and a special condition for chanda, wholesome desire, which has the nature of desiring to act. Niti pakarana, one's mind will be absorbed in and devoted to the activity and to the excellence it brings. One will work with the joy and concentration. But whatever tanha interrupts and displaces wholesome desire, chanda, such assertions creep in like my work, my results, or my future. Tanha, craving, may increase incitement or a passion for work, but it often is followed by anxiety with such thoughts as, what do they think of me? What do they think of my work? How does my work compare to that of others? This then results in competitiveness, covetousness, envy, and stress. In such circumstances, people will not experience joy in their work. Although they may feel pride, the conceit of craving, tanha mana, which comes from having a rival, They may hope that one may have finished their work. They will receive praise and admiration from others. If they wish their work or finish their work and people do not bestow the desired amount of praise, they suffer. Even if they do receive and desire the praise, later on with this event, it's just a memory. If they are not fully aware, they may be nostalgic and miss the good old times of being flattered, leading to further sadness and depression. Moreover, some people receive praise after accomplishing a deed and forget themselves. They do not purify the mind with insight. Their ego becomes inflated and they attach to this praise, giving rise to heightened conceit. They want more and more flattery and acknowledgement of their own greatness from other people, leading to aberrant, improper behavior, harm to themselves and others. Tanha, craving, can interfere at any stage of the process. Take, for example, one may complete one's work with wholesome enthusiasm, chanta, at which point tanha maintains, "This is my work," or else the motivation for the action may felicitate between craving and wholesome desire throughout the process. The important thing to remember is that tanha creates problems at whatever stage it appears. If these problems are not so severe as to endanger others, to cause social turmoil, at the very least, they create suffering for the person and become lodged as innate personality traits. Let me read that again. The important thing to remember is that craving, tanha, creates problems at whatever stage it appears. If these problems are not so severe as to endanger others or to cause social turmoil, at the very least, they create suffering for the person and becomes lodged as innate personality traits. Controversy number 9, or point number 9, desire for nibbida. When one distinguishes between craving and chanda, so tanha and chanda, craving and wholesome desire in everyday events or activities, then one will be able to know which of these factors constitute desire and aspiration for nibbida. When one listens to the Dhamma and understands the harm of mental defilements, that greed, hatred, and delusion stain the mind, lead to unwholesome actions, and creates all sorts of problems, one understands that by eliminating the defilements, one's mind will be peaceful, happy, without anxiety. One will recognize the value of such freedom from defilement. Wholesome desire, chanta, here is delight in, inclination towards the state of freedom. Freedom from dukkha, from suffering. In the Pali text, several explanations are used for this state of mind, endowed with wholesome desire, including abhinrama or abhirata, delighting in, abhipatana, the desire for the nibbida element, nibbida pata, the desire for security from bondage, yoga kima. This enthusiasm is wholesome quality and the attribute of one who practiced the Dhamma in order to attain nibbida. However, if one's yearning for nibbida is mixed up with the idea that nibbida is a desirable state or a place in which one can reside, then this way of thinking contains a hidden belief that nibbida will provide pleasure and eternal life, or will finally lead to a destruction and end of the self. In this case, the delight in and desire for nibbida is a form of tanha, craving, which impedes the realization of nibbida. The same principle holds true for the desire to become an arihat. Here we can see the difference between chanta and tanha, between wholesome desire and craving. Chanda, wholesome desire, is directly linked to action. It is the readiness and enthusiasm to act and to seek out an object that is recognized as beneficial and desirable. So it's the verb. Chanda, wholesome desire, is part of one state of action. It is the standing point of action, the beginning of all wholesome engagement. Craving, tanha, is a desire for something that is separate and alien to itself, a noun. Craving, tanha, only has an obscure understanding of things. It simply hopes to profit from an object and seek ways to obtain or consume it. So basically, it's like a noun. Point 10, abandonment of desire. In the reference to Dhamma practice, we can conclude the following. First, it is the normal state of affairs that unawakened mundane beings are governed by tanha, craving. And this tanha, craving, will arise whenever a person carelessly allows it an opportunity. Whatever craving arises, it leads to problems or to suffering, and therefore it should be eliminated and abandoned. Because craving is always prepared to manifest, to cause havoc. It is impossible for unawakened people to completely avoid it. There are two ways to deal with this situation. The first is, when necessary, to take advantage of craving, tanha, or to use tanha, craving, constructively. The second way stems from the understanding that wholesome desire, chanda, supports the realization and acquisition of things that are truly beneficial. And thus one should establish and apply it much as possible. Moreover, wholesome desire prevents and eliminates tanha, craving. Gautama Buddha stated that tanha, craving, should be eliminated. Buddhadhamma or Buddhadhamma, craving as the origination of suffering, and the Arya Satya, the Four Noble Truths. The 6 divisions of tanha, craving, the craving for existence, and so forth. On the other hand, wholesome desire, chanda, should be performed or accomplished, kariniya. So chanda should be generated in relation to all forms of right endeavor, samma apatana. It is equally accurate to say that both tanha and chanda, craving and desire, wholesome desire, should be abandoned. However, the abandonment of these two factors differs. Gautama Buddha, explained that tanha, craving, should be abandoned or eliminated right at the point of where it arises. Chanda, wholesome desire, on the other hand, should be abandoned by completing the action that is motivated by wholesome desire. So basically working it out. When this is accomplished, that person will no longer require chanda, wholesome desire, and it will end automatically. Tanha craving is a desire that one should eradicate or abandon immediately without exception. It should not be sustained or preserved. Chanda, wholesome desire, is a desire that one should sustain and bring to fulfillment, that which points to the end on its own. Craving, tanha, ends by abandonment. Chanda, wholesome desire, ends by accomplishment. Let me read that again. Craving is a desire that one should eradicate or abandon immediately without exception. It should not be sustained or preserved. Wholesome desire, chanda, is desire that which should sustain and bring to fulfillment, at which point it will end on its own accord. Tanha, craving, ends by abandonment. Wholesome enthusiasm, chanda, ends by accomplishment. The abandonment of chanda by accomplishment is referred as abandonment chanda by chanda, to apply wholesome desire in order to bring about its own end. This process is described in the following passage from the Tipitaka, the Pali Canon, which is discussed between Brahman and Venerable Ananda. So the Brahman poses, for what purpose Master Ananda is a brahmacharya, holy life lived under the ascetic Gautama? Ananda answers, for the sake of abandoning chanda, desire. The Brahman poses, is there a path, Magga? Is there a way of practice for abandoning this desire? Ananda answers, there is a path, Magga, Brahman. The Brahman poses, what is the path, Magga? What is the way for abandoning of this desire? Ananda answers, a bhikkhu develops the basis for spiritual power consisting of samadhi, concentration of desire, and of mental formation of striving. He develops the basis for spiritual power consisting of the concentration of effort, the concentration of mind, the concentration of investigation, and the mental formation of striving. This is the path, Magga. This is the way for the abandoning of this desire. The Brahman puts it, such being the case, the pre-existing desire still exists. It has not ceased to exist. Is it impossible that one can abandon desire by means of desire itself? Ananda says, well then, Brahman, I will question you about this matter in return. Answer as you see fit. What do you think, Brahman? Did you earlier have the desire, I will go to the monastery? And after you came to the monastery, did the corresponding desire subside? The Brahmin answered, yes, sir. Ananda says, did you earlier arouse energy, virya, apply focus, reflection, sita, use wisdom to investigate, vimamsa, in relation to the question, shall I go to the monastery? And after you went to the monastery, did the corresponding energy, focus, reflection, investigation subside? The Brahmin answers, yes, sir. Ananda finally says, it is exactly the same with a bhikkhu who is an arihat, one whose taints are destroyed. He has earlier had the desire for the attainment of arihatship, and when he attained arihatship, the corresponding desire subsided. He either had an aroused energy, applied focused reflection, used wisdom to investigate, and when he attained arihatship, the corresponding energy, reflection, investigation subsided. Point 11, abandoning craving by way of craving. In relation to craving, although Gautama Buddha's primary teaching is to abandon craving at the moment it arises, he acknowledged the frailties, habitual tendencies, the lack of preparedness of mundane, unawakened people. He therefore established ways of practice in which a person may take advantage of craving in order to generate positive results. As documented in the Tipitaka, the Pali Canon, Gautama Buddha claimed that it is possible to use tanha, craving, in the way, even for the greatest benefit, to realize nibbida. The secondary principle of relying on tanha in order to eradicate craving is evident to the following teaching which Venerable Ananda gave to a bhikkhuni who had fallen in love with him. He says, "Sister, when I said the body has become into being through craving, one should rely on craving in order to abandon craving," which reference to what was this said. In the case a monk hears it, it says, "They say that a monk of such and such a name, by the destruction of asavas, taints, in the very life, enters and dwells in the taintless liberation of the mind. Liberation by wisdom. Having realized it for himself by direct knowledge, he then thinks, oh, shall I too realize the taintless liberation of mind? Liberation by wisdom. Then sometime later, based on that craving, he abandons craving." The desire of a monk in this story who has heard another monk's realization of arihatship and wants to become an arihat himself. He clearly sees a form of craving. He sees the state of arihatship as something external to himself, and he desires what's the sense of self, to possess, or to dwell in this state. The use of craving here is skillful means, a method to reach one's goal, and an enticement to perform actions that are required to reach this goal. People who apply this form of enticement should develop an understanding of the process so they will gradually be inspired by the feeling of zeal, of goodness that is direct results of their actions. In this way, they will generate chanda, wholesome desire, and switch to this motivation of wholesome desire by their own accord. To accomplish that switch is a form of spiritual training. However, if the transition from craving to wholesome desire is unsuccessful, the exercise is considered a failure. The enticement is often not the direct result of action. Take, for example, after Gautama Buddha's half-brother, Nanda, was ordained as a monk, he began to think about his former sweetheart and lost his inspiration for the holy life. Gautama Buddha knew what he was thinking and led him to one of the heavenly realms to acquire the celestial nymphs. As a consequence, Venerable Nanda forgot about his former sweetheart and began to desire the nymph instead. Gautama Buddha guaranteed Nanda that if he continued to put forth virya, effort, in the holy life, he could expect to enjoy the company of celestial nymphs. When Nanda began to apply himself once again to the holy life, he recognized the true purpose and progress in the spiritual path until he attained arihatship. Gautama Buddha seldom uses this method of promising a reward. He used it carefully, only when he determined that what was most suitable for the circumstances. Everyday examples of this method include the promise of a reward if a child cleans the house, or a promised gift if the child finishes reading a book, etc. This method is a skillful tool in education. The person who employs this method must do it so responsibly. Be carefully considering how to lead the child to the stage of wholesome enthusiasm. This person should at least hope that by enticing the child to clean or to read, he or she will gradually see the beneficial results of these actions and develop a love of cleanliness or a love of knowledge. Even better, one should encourage children to apply wise reflection, yo niso manasikara, to understanding the vow of cleanliness of knowledge, so that they develop a love for and a delight in these qualities. Wholesome desire, chanda, would then arise naturally for them, and cleaning or reading would no longer be a precondition for attaining a separate reward. This method of using tanha, craving, as a motivation or a condition for chanda is exceptional if they truly lead to wholesome desire. But if it does not lead to, it could increase harmful effects. Such as a way for fulfilling craving, it can create bad habits and instill seeds of suffering in the children's lives. It has repercussions in this wider society. It produces a generation of people who expect rewards and do not perform good actions without some enticement. Those who use this method should make careful and thorough preparations and be confident of success. They should help throughout the entire process until wholesome enthusiasm is generated. The relationship between tanha and chanda, craving and wholesome desire, is very complex. Take, for example, a student who chooses to study medicine because he believes that being a doctor is a lucrative profession. He will become rich quickly. If he is driven merely by the craving for material comfort, kama tanha, he may only study to meet the required terms for obtaining the medical certificate. Or, because he is not truly interested in medicine, he may not be able to endure the hardship of studying and drop out part way. If he wants to be respected and successful doctor, however, he will consider that a doctor should have ample knowledge and expertise. This craving for becoming bhava tanha conditions him to study in determined fashion. The quality of being a good doctor determined by tanha, craving for becoming bhava tanha, of being famous or respected, are related to the ideal state of being a good doctor, a state in which chanda delights. Chanda may arise later, helping him to study earnestly and to seek expertise in the field of medicine. Alternatively, during the time that he tries to fulfill the terms set by craving, he may be deeply inspired by the medical profession. In the end, he may develop a true love for the study of medicine, receive a medical degree, and gain expertise, and yet so seek out a position that affords the highest incomes and the greatest prominence. Another student may witness many fellow human beings who suffer from various illness and see their own ways of life or physical surroundings are detrimental to good health. She desires a knowledge for solving these problems and for helping these people. She desires all people to be healthy, strong, and happy, and she wants her society to be peaceful and secure. She chooses to study medicine with this thought in mind, and she is enthusiastic and determined to obtain knowledge to help according to her intentions. Here, chanda, wholesome desire, is expressed through compassion, karuna. If she sustains this wholesome enthusiasm throughout, after her studies, she will choose a position that offers the best opportunity to improve people's health and to be free from illness without giving much thought of fame or money.